Good morning. It's May 3rd, 2022, a Thursday, getting to the end of June here. Welcome to Triggered. I'm Cory Morgan. This is the Western Standard's daily live show. We run Monday to Friday. I think next week's going to be a short one. We don't do the long weekends. 11:30 till about 1 o'clock Mountain Standard Time every day. We have guests. We discuss news issues, and we have interaction, talking back and forth through the comment scroll over there. Guys, take advantage of it. You know, being live, as I've said before, comes with a lot of challenges. We get those frustrating things like guests who don't make it or mess ups on my part, but it's worth it to have that fluid interaction going on and conversation and things coming up unexpectedly. It makes it more interesting, I like to think anyways, than those canned shows that are pre-recorded. Not that they're all bad. So good to see you all joining in that scroll. Just be, civil to each other. Throw those questions and comments my way or towards the guests. I've got some good guests coming up in a little while. And we'll just see what is going on in the world today and what's got me pissed off, which is always a subject to kick things off. I'll get to that in a moment. Let's see, though. We've got the daily observances. I like to hit those while everybody's settling in and getting ready for the show. It is Let It Go Day. This is a tough one for me. I'm not good at that. I hang on to things like a fat kid on a Smartie. I get on there and I just can't let go. But all the same, it is good, healthy advice. Make sure sometimes just let it go, take a breath, put it behind you, get on with it. Good advice for everybody, including myself. I'll see if I can learn to take advantage of that. As well, it is, I don't know where this one came from, Runner's Selfie Day. So this is the day, I guess, if you're out running, as you can see, take your selfie of yourself while you're running. I guess it's sort of that personal virtue signaling thing. It's just like vegans and cyclists. They always got to make sure the world knows what they're doing. You got to know about it. You never know, you'll know a vegan the second they come in. They'll let you know really fast. And cyclists, you look at any of their social media accounts or anything else, they usually have their helmet on in their profile picture and something referencing their cycling and everything. And for the same reason they always ride on main highways. Not that it's a nice place to ride, but just look at me, guys. Look at me. I'm saving the world. So either way, if you're a runner, and there's nothing wrong with running, and what the hell, celebrate it, get out there. Today's the day to do your runner's selfie and share it with the world. All right. Now, with today's guests coming up in a while, I'm going to have UCP leadership candidate Todd Lohan. That'll be a good conversation. I've known Todd for quite some time, and he's coming in from a different perspective as somebody who was ejected from the UCP caucus, but now running for the leadership of the party itself. We'll see how it's going and what he's got to offer. And then for something a little bit different, I'm going to talk to Dr. Samuel West, and he's the curator of the Museum of Failure. Yes, this is a full-out museum that documents and tracks, failures, corporate failures, things. I mean, one that'll jump to mind first thing is the new Coke. And they cover that there. And that museum is going to be setting up in Calgary for a month starting on July 1st, I believe. So that'll be a fun and different chat. But all right, getting me on to other things, though. Let's get on to what's got me wound up today and got the ears steaming, the things that I won't let go. So in any other country, it would take a government down. In Canada, it's not even making the top headlines with legacy media outlets. Right now, there's some pretty solid evidence that the Prime Minister's office may have directly pressured RCMP Commissioner Brenda Lucki to interfere with the active investigation into the worst mass shooting in Canadian history to score political points. Now, some columnists out there have taken up the cause and are writing on this scandal, but many others are trying to direct rage towards the faux scandal of Conservative MPs who offered parliamentary tours to some activists. It's the journalistic version of shouting, "Hey, squirrel," in hopes of distracting the public eye from an issue they don't want to gain traction. Other reporters are busy offering fawning coverage of Prime Minister Trudeau as he tours Africa and dodges questions on the scandal. This is the sort of journalism that subsidized media buys, with the government dangling hundreds of millions in tax subsidies in front of media outlets, and of course subsidizing the state broadcaster to the tune of $1.4 billion a year. There's little appetite among the media outlets to upset the apple cart. The Liberal government has created a system where media outlets have to apply and be accredited as official with this nebulous closed-door committee. If an outlet isn't considered to be an official media outlet, they won't qualify for the myriad of subsidies and handouts. With the rules for qualification not being clearly defined, media dependent on these handouts are pretty motivated to avoid annoying the government lest they suddenly lose that accreditation. Just as a side note, the Western Standard applied for accreditation and we were accepted, by the way. We then refused the applications for the subsidies. We just wanted to see if we could do it. We won't give away our independence for handouts. This method, though, of keeping the media in line appears to be working like a charm. If Such a disgraceful scandal as prime ministerial interference into a mass murder investigation were breaking 10 years ago. The prime minister would be swarmed with reporters at every stop and they'd be demanding answers. The issue would top every headline and an independent inquiry would be struck into the matter within days. Today, we're seeing a little outrage expressed on Twitter and a few columns cutting into the issue. That's about it. If Trudeau slithers out of this scandal, as he has with many others, he'll continue on his authoritarian path of controlling media and information. Bills C11 and C18 are still quietly moving through Parliament, and if they pass, Canada will be second only to nations like North Korea and China as far as government control of information in the media and on social media are concerned. Academics like Michael Geist have been ringing alarm bells on this government effort to control information and discourse for years, but a meek legacy media will barely talk about it. Just think of the ramifications. If this story that only reaches the third tier of legacy media attention right now, like what this is leading to. Senior RCMP officials have stated that while the 22 bodies of the victims of the Nova Scotia mass shootings had barely cooled yet, the commissioner of the RCMP was bypassing communication protocols, apparently on the behalf of the Prime Minister's office. She was pushing for the early release of evidence to the public in the investigation in order to help Trudeau push some gun control legislation he was cooking. She very well could have damaged the investigation, and at the very least, she should resign. As it stands right now, Commissioner Lucky is still comfortable in her job, and the Prime Minister just said, no, I didn't have anything to do with it, and he's moved on. Since he's hiding overseas right now, MPs can't question him in Parliament, and Canada's pathetic legacy media corps aren't working terribly hard to put the questions to him either. If Justin Trudeau skates past this scandal, much of the reason will be due to a broken media environment. It also indicates that virtually no scandal can take this guy down. Just think of what sort of governance we can look forward to with Trudeau confident in the knowledge that he's politically invincible. It's scary, guys. If this doesn't take him down, what will? What will? 22 murdered Canadians, and they pissed around in the investigation of it for political gain. And as far as you can tell on the news, it never even happened. All right, enough of that. Let's get on to the newsroom where we do cover those issues. I know the Western Standard covered this, and I'm sure not letting it go. How's it going, Dave?
It's going well, Cory. I blame Toronto. I blame the people of Toronto for, they just keep electing Liberals, and that's the difference.
If you won't fire them, then what do you expect? They're just going to get all the more arrogant.
Exactly. Anyway, we got some major news breaking at the moment, Cory. We've got our Rachel Emmanuel has confirmed that Michelle Rempel-Garner will not run for the UCP leadership. And one of the reasons that she's not running is because of Rachel's story earlier this week that 13 of 17 caucus members who were asked whether or not they should give her a special exemption said no, they didn't want her. So she knew, looks like she knew she was coming into a divided caucus and has chosen not to go down that path. So major news on the UCP front. Speaking of the Trudeau investigation, he came out of hiding in Africa tonight over there, and basically said, nothing to see here, move along. We didn't interfere, and I've got all the confidence in the world in Brenda Lucki. So, yeah, as you say, Cory, another one goes by, and nobody bites the dust. We've got all the details on the Pope's visit to Alberta, which is coming up very quickly. Next month, details on his arrival times in Edmonton and where he's traveling around the province and who he's meeting with. And he's going to be conducting an open-air mass at Commonwealth Stadium. So that'll be a highlight of his trips, I'm sure, and as well as meeting Indigenous and residential school survivors. The cowardly police chief of Uvalde, Texas, has been placed on administrative leave. This is after he ordered his officers not to go in and try and get the school shooter there. Instead, they waited outside for 70 minutes while the shooter slaughtered 22 children and teachers. We've got a column from a UCP candidate, Danielle Smith, talking about some of her campaign promises, saying she just wants Alberta to be treated like Quebec, basically. What else have we got, Cory? Apparently there's going to be major thunderstorms and possible tornadoes this evening, early afternoon and evening in Saskatchewan and Manitoba. So our Chris Alcorn out there has done a story on that, and everybody be careful out there. And coming up, we've got a couple of good stories. The swearing in of our Governor General, who you've been talking about, Cory, for racking up that massive catering bill on a flight to Dubai. Turns out her investiture cost taxpayers $170,000. That's a lot of little appetizers and finger food, Cory, and Canadian Taxpayers Federation is not happy about it. And one of the things Trudeau announced today in Africa is he's going to give $250 million of taxpayers' money to sort of a food campaign to make sure hungry people in other countries are getting their proper food. So that's what we've got at the moment, Cory, and lots more to come this afternoon.
That there is. I know it's busy in that newsroom. Well, I appreciate the updates, and on a sad note, that other one, I don't know if we covered that, but that gorilla passed away.
Right, yes, I'm sorry, I should have mentioned that. The young female gorilla had an aggressive form of liver cancer, and they made, the poor thing passed away at the zoo last night. So sad day at the zoo, and a sad day for all fans of the zoo.
Yeah, it is, and it's always a popular area. Well, I guess we all get taken eventually, but we report on the good news and the bad.
Good and the bad, and sometimes the funny.
Yeah, that's right. All right, well, thanks, Dave. I'll talk to you a little later.
Take care, Cory.
Great. That was Dave Naylor, our news editor in the Western Standard newsroom, and yet just lots and lots on the go. Side note, almost some inside stuff. For those, if you don't get the newsletter already, you should sign up for it. And we were stumped, or Dave was stumped, like, what's going on? There's a whole bunch of stories, didn't make it into the newsletter this morning. And it comes in people's email and gives them all those headlines and stories. Well, didn't know why. And then we realized we'd put out so many unique stories yesterday that it actually was more than the newsletter was designed to handle. Like, it was like over 40 stories posted. I mean, it blows away the other media outlets. We've got reporters across this country reporting on these things, getting unique content and putting it up there all the time. And the reason we can do it, by the way, the newsletter's fixed now, is because you guys have subscribed. So to those who have subscribed to us, thank you very much. That's what keeps us independent. That's what keeps us from, dancing to the Prime Minister's tune on national issues, as we're watching the legacy media outlets doing right now. I mean, it's got to be humiliating, to be honest, to be some of those, because there's some good journalists out there. There's some investigative ones. They really would love to dig into this, but they're probably getting orders from above. Yeah, don't shake that tree too much right now. We can't afford to get in trouble. So let's just kind of let this one slide into the background. We won't do that. We don't take tax dollars. And the reason is because you guys subscribe. So check it out, westernstandard.news/membership. If you haven't subscribed already, $10 a month, $99 a year. And you get full access to all of those stories out there. It's well worth it. We're not asking for charity. We're creating something, and we want to sell it to you. And we think it's a worthwhile product. And many of our subscribers obviously agree. And if you share it with someone else. Buy a subscription for someone else. Get that, like I said, that crazy Uncle Louie who ticks you off, the lefty at every Thanksgiving dinner. Send him a subscription. Come on, have some fun. All right, so let's see what else we got going on. We had the gorilla. Michelle Rempel, I believe it was Cheryl Dawn was pointing that out, and I kind of agree. This dipping the toe in the water for the leadership of the UCP, I don't know how serious it ever was. As it was said, she'd gotten herself into a mess with that Patrick Brown campaign. I mean, that campaign was going ugly. It's going off the rails. It's always been a weird campaign, and mostly just seems to be there to shoot at Poilievre. Likely almost a possible stalking horse campaign, but she hitched her wagon very directly to it. And this gave her a way out, this way, well, I've got to resign all these positions because I'm considering a run for the UCP. And now she's gotten herself extricated from all those ties to the Brown campaign. It's, you know what, come to think of it, I'm not going to run for the UCP either. So now she's just back to being a unencumbered member of parliament, with the opposition party. Where she'll go from there, who knows? She's been a difficult politician to pin down over the years. She's unpredictable. I guess that's refreshing with some of them that are just, dull as dishwater, and you can pretty much anticipate everything they're going to do. But all the same, Just another weird move out of Michelle Rempel Garner, and I think I'm with Cheryl on it that I think it was just planned to get her butt out of the Brown campaign so she can not go down with that ship. Because the votes that are going to come in for Brown, we'll see when this leadership goes. I just strongly suspect they aren't going to be anything terribly outstanding. But yeah, Kitty Malcontent. It's an interesting name there. One of the commenters saying, always shocked at the PM and his scandals. We still believe the premise that we have a parliamentary democracy. Well, we kind of do, but it's kind of like Dave said, we got to get off our asses and vote. And I know it's not so much us, it's Toronto, it's Montreal, it's Lower Mainland BC. But what does it take to have the shine come off of this fake, shallow, authoritarian prime minister we have right now? I mean, he's brutal, you guys. He's brutal. And they just won't let him go. I mean, this isn't a left-right issue. People on the left and the right were horrified by that shooting in spring of 2020. Like, oh my God, 22 people were murdered, gunned down pointlessly. This is an investigation at that time, definitely the most important active investigation in the country. I mean, this is critical. We want to get to the bottom of this. I mean, with some of the communications things that were going on, and this is coming from senior police officers, and these officers, their reputation, there's other officers, the past police commissioner, RCMP commissioner has come up and said, these guys are of integrity. And they said, one of them said, this is a quote, 100% Lucky was doing this on behalf of the Trudeau government to help them with their gun control legislation. She was messing around with the communications just hours after they'd shot the shooter out there in Nova Scotia. So, I mean, this investigation is still hot as all get out. They don't even know for sure at this point if there's not more shooters. They don't know what's going on. And she's out doing press conferences off to the side, breaking protocol, interfering with an investigation. And again, at the least, she should be fired. But there should be an inquiry. What the hell is going on? This isn't a minor case of interference into an investigation. This could have caused some very, very serious damage. And the media, like I said, I can see Trudeau trying to spin and brush it off and others, but the media on this is treating this as if it's not a big deal. As I said at the start of the rant, that this is how, in most countries, this would take a government down. I mean, this would be the end for them. I got a feeling Trudeau's going to come back from his latest little globe-trotting tour, and this will be forgotten over the summer. Nobody will pay. At worst, Brenda Lucki might get thrown under the bus. But the only way that'll happen is if it stays alive, if it stays in the scroll, if it keeps dogging them. And I don't see indications that it will. As I said, there's certainly some columnists and a few others expressing rage over this, but for the most part, they're just, it's not a big deal. I just don't know what it takes anymore. I really don't. Let me speak to one of my sponsors before I get on to some more news copy here. And that is Bitcoinwell. Those guys have been sponsoring us very kindly for quite some time. They're a fantastic sponsor. They are a Western Canadian-based company, a real company, a bricks and mortar company. So many virtual things, particularly with things like digital currency, makes it difficult to trust. Trust is everything. You want to know that whoever's helping you with these things is a solid, reputable company. Well, that's what Bitcoinwell is. They're publicly traded, and they take digital currencies and make them practical. They help you. They're for people who are beginners, well, and advanced people in digital currencies, but they make it make sense. As you can see, Bitcoin's for everyone, and it shows how you can utilize it. They'll walk you through it. They got free, personalized, one-on-one service. They can set up things even like e-transfers, so you can move your Bitcoin around trouble-free, easily, pay your utility bills, all sorts of things. They make it practical, they make it real, and they are a bunch to trust. So check them out, guys, bitcoinwell.com. And take control of your money. All right, here's a beauty to get some things going. So, Theresa Tam, Dr. Tam, everybody's favorite federal health authority doctor there. She did such a good job in this last 3 years. Such an outstanding job. She made so many Canadians happy. She had such a solid grasp of the pandemic. Really got our confidence. They've decided to reward her with a 22% raise. Yes, I didn't stutter. Tam has gotten a 22% pay raise. So that brings her up to $324,000 a year. This is the woman who told us to use Kleenex to ward off infections. This is the one who told us to mask and then not to mask. Back and forth. Again, speaking of people appointed by Trudeau, well, there's the reward, guys. Here you go. Have a 22% raise. The rest of us are tightening our belt. We're getting the crap beaten out of us by inflation, not to mention, many, many other challenges going on out there. And Theresa Tam has gotten herself a 22% raise. I mean, they raised by $59,000. A lot of Canadians don't even make the amount she got in a raise. Nice work if you can get it. So, go home happy today as you wonder how you're going to pay your bills, knowing that, senior bureaucrats who do such a crappy job as Tam are getting raises. But we've reported that before, the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation. I mean, on average, all those civil servants have been getting like over $12,000 in bonuses. And there's hundreds and hundreds of them. Just to respond to a commenter, SRT Bull saying, is Paul Hinman coming on the show today? No, somebody putting out a mistaken tweet. I do have Paul Hinman coming on the show tomorrow. He will be on and we will talk because, there's some pretty serious issues brewing within the Wilders Independence Party right now. It sounds like they've got some heavy-duty internal challenges and fights going on between Paul and the leader of the party, Paul Hinman, and their board of directors. So I'm going to talk to Paul about that, and I may have Rick Northey from there too coming on after Paul, just to try and get to the bottom of what is going on, because if there's nothing alternative and new small parties want to do, it's infight, and I know it all too well from my time with the Wild Rose Party. Yeah, getting back to Tam, wow, she recently, Tam, she acknowledged she underestimated the infection rates, and then it's one error after another. This government rewards incompetence. It rewards lackluster performances. What it really is they reward loyalty. As much as Tam didn't bring about the confidence of Canadians, as much as she didn't manage the pandemic well, she stayed loyal to Prime Minister Trudeau. So they make sure, we'll grease your palm. Don't worry. We'll make sure you're covered. We got your back, Ms. Tam. And there we go. So there's that raise. And I'm sure, I think they signed her to another 3 years contract. So we're not going to get away without seeing her smiling face greeting us on TV screens for at least 3 years at this rate anyways. This is where we're sitting. Let's see, this is a federal line. Let's talk about the feds, again, what's the saying, don't piss on my leg and tell me it's raining. Well, that's pretty much what they're doing. But again, it seems to keep working. So they're calling it a search for truth. This is the feds and their response. This is from the Attorney General, David Lametti, with C-18. That's one of those federal bills, the ones that wants to control information. It's the Online News Act. And it would basically allow the heavyweights. You see, this act will really benefit the big ones, the establishment media, the legacy media. And then they can strong arm revenue from Google and Facebook and things like that. So, they're calling this a search for truth. I mean, what a load of crap. I mean, this is the federal government trying to control media even further, as we're seeing with the media basically looking the other way on what should be the scandal of the century with Justin Trudeau's possible meddling in an active mass murder investigation. And it worked for them. It works. So, and Brenda, please putting CCCP over again and over and again. You made your point, but I don't like the comment scroll being spammed. Thank you. So either way, they're feeding us BS. This legislation's going. As I said, there's some indication that the Senate might stand up. That's the only kind of hope we've got is that the Senate, they did stand up on Bill S7. Maybe they're going to stand up on 18 and C11. I saw that coming up. There's people lining up to fight at the Taxpayers Federation and some others getting ready and hopefully get that Senate to be active. We'll see. There might be a chance of pushing some of this down. Jet Gorgon saying, is user content our comments? Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know. I mean, they really want to control discourse and discussion all over the place. And these guys, they just lie. They lie right to our faces. But the reason they do is because it works. So, I mean, yeah, Lamenti saying freedom of expression protects speakers as well as listeners. What? Wait a minute. What? Protects listeners. Freedom of expression protects listeners. See, that's where they get to. That's where they start setting these bars, these arbitrary bars on how they're going to infringe on our rights, freedoms, and speech. So that's when they start saying we got to protect the listeners. Free expression protects listeners. What? Again, but they want to protect the right to not have your feelings hurt. They want to protect the right not to be offended. That's the terms they want to use. Just like Twitter, for example, I've only been suspended from Twitter twice, for example. And, it's a playground. I'm rough on there. I offend. Both times it's because I misgendered. It's because I referred to that crazed transsexual person out in Vancouver who was trying to force people to wax her balls at esthetician places on the coast. And of course, they wouldn't do it. They were not geared to wax men's genitalia. And she was putting the screws to them. And I tweeted a couple of times and referred to her as a he, and I got suspended. Now, I try to be polite, actually, if somebody wants to identify whatever way, and I will refer to it. But should I get shut down just because I've misgendered? I mean, why? Because it offended you? Well, if it offended you, block me. But don't have me kicked off of a social media platform. Because all I said was something that's offensive. It wasn't inaccurate. And you get pushed down. Now, and I don't think this gets complicated. A private outfit like Twitter, well, it is private. They can do whatever the hell they want. They don't have to have me on there. But we shouldn't be protected from hearing things that might hurt our feelings, or at least it's not the state's place to protect us from that. If you don't like it, listen elsewhere. It's just like recently I saw some story, I'm not sure where it was, but the police were called and they followed through and called some comedian because somebody got offended in the audience. Well, don't go to the damn show. But this keeps feeding these control freaks. This keeps feeding these busybodies. It keeps giving them the feeling, and perhaps they're right, the ability to come up with things like C18 where they can control everything you get to see, every platform where you get to communicate, and every way you can talk. And narrow it down to a narrow number of media outlets, and they can control the messaging that's going to go around out there. So listening to this guy talking about C18 as if this is protecting us, as Lamenti is saying this is better, spare me. This is a solution in search of a problem. The only problem is there's been open discussion critical of the government. There's been media that's been outside of their narrow box. It's been critical of them. It's been exposing them, and they don't like that. But you know what? It's working. It's working. As I said, I got up today. I go through all the news stories. I go through the headlines. I mean, there's reporting on this scandal of potential interference into a criminal investigation by the Prime Minister's office. But it's like the fourth story down. It's not the headline. They got other pap and crap up top. This should be on top of the headlines until there's an inquiry and find out what the hell is going on. But the media, no, they're doing as they're told. And they want to bring in these laws even further, drive it even deeper, and take away your ability to hear. So it's waiting study now from the Heritage Committee. Heritage, like, again, that's where they want to control and protect your blessed ears. This is heritage now. This is where we have to regulate it so people cover it. That's where they talk about you have to have a certain amount of Canadian content and things like that. It's garbage. It's all just utilizing ways to control information. And I don't know if it's going to get stopped. And and following up with the next story, speaking of fake news, this is here. Freeland's claim was false. There's a shocker. A senior cabinet minister from Justin Trudeau's government was spreading baloney. Geez, that's almost unheard of now, isn't it? But yeah, she claimed that taxpayers will likely recover, likely, that's the word she used, billions spent on the Trans Mountain pipeline. And apparently the budgetary office said, nah, that's not so true. But it doesn't matter. They just lie. They throw it out there, and they don't get called on it. The media, again, they just let it slide off. They're not critical of them, at least not the legacy media. So, but the budget office report, what a mess they've made, right? So they're saying that Let's see, the best case scenario, the government's going to lose $600 million with the Trans Mountain pipeline expansion whenever it's done. If it's halted, though, there's already $14.4 billion sunk into it. That's something that the budget office is also saying. Like, it's amazing how badly the government has screwed up this expansion. It's outrageous. It's outrageous. We had Kinder Morgan happily wanting to put private dollars in there, build that pipeline. It wouldn't have cost you a nickel as a taxpayer. If the government had gotten out of the damn way, that thing would already be flowing. It would be going. And look at this. Look at the world oil prices. The whole country would be benefiting by expanded sales of our resources to a world that's desperate for energy. And this thing's still, that picture that Nico just posted of it with these pipes laying all over in the mud and the trucks is about right. I mean, it's in progress, but it agonizingly slowly, way over budget. It just keeps costing more and more, and not a single drop has gone through that thing. And this isn't even a new pipeline. This is an expansion of an existing one. The Trans Mountain Pipeline's been pumping oil safely since the 50s through that whole area. They're not even cutting new bush. They're going to widen the right-of-way a little and lay it right next to it. And this lunacy, this anti-pipeline bullshit that's constantly going on from activists and others, and I'm sick of it. I worked in the oil field for a long time. Your average urban citizen doesn't even know what a pipeline looks like. They don't realize how many out there. They don't realize how safe they are. Get out there. They walk in the bush. They cross a big cut line. They don't even know they just walked across a major pipeline. Wondering, when they're walking their dog in the city and they got a big, long, winding parkway that's narrow, chances are, look around when you cross a fence or something, there's probably a sign, you're probably walking on a pipeline. Pipelines aren't evil, guys. But they're sure costing us a fortune as we do mountains and mountains of regulation and paperwork and applications and pandering and consultations. How many consultations did we really need? Look at the route of the Trans Mountain line. Once you get out of Alberta, and most of Alberta is through farmland and private land, and the owners are, again, it's an expansion of an existing line. They'll get paid for it. They're fine with it. Then you get into the mountains in BC. There's nobody living within miles of most of this thing. A lot of the areas that go through, yes, absolutely. There were First Nations communities nearby. Those First Nations communities were not adversely impacted by the main line for the last 60 years. This wasn't going to hurt them either. But here we are with this thing still mired, half built, laying out there. There's people working on it. They get terribly upset. I mean, yeah, Brian says he works in the batch, and yeah, the average Joe has no idea out there. No, and they get upset. They're saying, we're working on it. We're doing it. It's going to go. Okay, I know it's not your fault on the ground, guys, but this thing, my God, we might actually get to the green transition by the time this pipeline is actually finished, if such a thing exists, and won't have anywhere to sell it. Just, if this government wants to do something, they'll do it. They will. I mean, they wanted to clear out the protesters in Ottawa. They were willing to suspend civil rights for individuals in order to do it, and they got it done. They hammered it through. Well, then why can't they just put their foot on the gas and say, this damn pipeline's going to be built? Here we go. We're putting the money in. There's been enough applications, talk, and BS going on. I don't care about a potential hummingbird on 20 feet of trees that could fly back in and avoid the whole thing, and just get the damn thing done. And they won't. They won't. They're terrified. I've said it before too, and I'll say it again. I won't believe this thing until I see it. Until there's product in one end and out the other. And the pressure keeps coming on. Every time we get these releases from the budgetary office and stuff like that, the environmentalists are saying, shut it down now. I despise it when they try to play business people. Look at it. It's not economical. Look, if it wasn't, there wouldn't have been private companies wanting to do it in the first place. The only thing that made the pipeline unviable was the damn government and the permits. And then you see the problem is, while the government pissed around and stared at their feet and messed around with this pipeline, a whole bunch of all those applications that were already done, all those studies, that cottage industry of HSE maggots who just create more and more burdens and more paperwork and more legislation, expires. They always put expiry dates on those things. Then you got to start the whole process over again. Meanwhile, nothing's getting done. It drives me bananas. And I tell you, yes, it's those safety guys, it's the HR guys, it's the bureaucratic minded people. They're in the oil companies and outside of them as well. But the oil companies respond by pandering to legislation rather than standing up for themselves. Push back and say that's enough. HSE, safety regulations. Let's talk about bureaucracies that kill efficiency in construction and oil field. I mean, it used to be when I started in the field, 30 years ago, you would have a safety meeting maybe once a week before we go to the field. We get together in the hotel and talk over a few issues, some pressing things, and go on. By the time I left, I did an Arctic contract towards the end where we had a meeting every morning with 100 guys packed into a big room in the center of the barge camp out in the Beaufort Sea for 40 minutes every day. How much was this costing? To have every employee all standing around for 40 minutes to talk safety. You know what? Working in the Arctic isn't terribly complicated. There's a lot of dangerous things up there. Absolutely. And you want to make sure that the messages of safety are repeated, but there's still only so many, guys. It's cold. There's polar bears. There could be thin ice. Follow your maps where the ice profiling's been. Don't speed, basic common sense things. 40 minutes a day, 100 guys for 100 days. What did that cost on that project? For what? To tell us that it's cold outside in the Arctic. But that's what these safety guys do. The paperwork is insane. And this sort of bureaucracy goes top to bottom in the whole oil field and energy sector. And it's the environmental aspect is just as bad and just as ridiculous. So, we had a program I did for Shell. Boy, I would never want to work for those guys again. We actually had to have, this was a heli-portable program. We're on foot, we're in the mountains. And every one of us had to have one of these idiotic biologists tagging along with us all day. These chunky, weak, marshmallowy students, because these weren't big-time graduates or at a high level. They just got picked up by Shell. And they would slow us down because there was one area we weren't allowed to work because this ding-dong said, there's wild onions growing here. We don't want to crush those when we put the drill down and set the dynamite. It's a wild onion, guys. It's not endangered. Well, I said no. So he wouldn't sign off on it. We have to move. The stories have no end to how stupid it's getting. And for what? And these pipelines, things like that, you wonder why it's bad enough when the private industry is allowed this sort of mentality to get into them that badly. But now the government is running this program. So of course, they've just packed on even more regulation on top of regulation. I can't imagine how bad it's got to be. What kind of meetings do they have in the morning before starting on the Trans Mountain Line? It's not moving an inch, guys. We got to get real. But either way, they're just standing there and talking in circles and acting as if they're going to recoup the expenses on this thing. So, look at this. The cabinet budgeted $17 billion to buy and get that thing done. Right now, the costs are estimated at $26 billion. This is just in a few years. Only government can manage to blow it that badly, knock it out of the water. And who knows what it's going to cost by the time they ever actually finish it, if they finish it. But we need a government with backbone. We need some spirit. I don't know why the left just won't get on board with this. They've embraced this crazy cult of environmentalism and understand, if you really want all these social programs, you really want this massive healthcare system, public education, all of these things, addictions treatment centers, you name it. The money's got to come from somewhere. And guess what? We're sitting on some of the best resources on the planet. We got trillions worth of oil and gas in this country. If you want all those programs, you should want this oil to be getting to market, and gas. But these idiots have no clue. It's like in BC too, that, we're going to go all electric. We're going to ban natural gas from the city for heating and cooking, and we're going to legislate electric vehicles all over the place. And as we do so, we aren't going to build any alternatives. The disaster is looming so hard because the environmentalists are fighting everything. Site C Dam, for example, it's in northern BC. The environmentalists are fighting it tooth and nail. Pure renewable energy, hydroelectric energy, emissions-free energy, and guess what? The left doesn't like that either. Can we go nuclear? No, they don't like nuclear either. Well, we're running out of options, kiddies. We're running out of options. How are we going to pay these damn bills if you won't allow us to do anything? And the financial outlet's looking bad. By the way, our outlook, I should say, I should say I've been rambling for a while. The reason is, yes, my guest no-showed on me. It was supposed to be Todd Lohan. I don't know what happened to him. This has been a hell of a week for that, guys. I'm batting 1,000 on it. I think it seems in the nice weather, our guests tend to allow themselves to be distracted and not show up for scheduled interviews at times, but it's a frustrating thing. So I'll just talk about some more news. I do have another guest in 10 minutes, and we'll talk to him about some things. But yeah, I'm not sure what happened to Mr. Loewen. I hope we can track him down and find out later. Either way, let's see. We got a retirement crisis in the works. This is a survey that was done. And it says more Canadians are facing challenges to save for retirement security as inflation soars and markets decline, a survey has found. Yeah, this shouldn't be a shocker. This is one of those cases of reporting the obvious. And inflation kills retirement savings. I mean, if your money is in dollars and that dollar loses purchasing power, you're pretty much hooped. Inflation, the ones that it hurts the most are people on fixed incomes, people who get that very modest Jet Gorgon saying, where are your guests, Cory? Yes, thank you, Jet. And keep those comments and questions coming. I got to keep talking, and I'm happy to. And I love the inspiration on hearing from you guys because we can carry this show on and do things. So I'll talk a little bit more finance on this thing with retirement because there's a lot of people, again, it's predominantly the left, but people who don't understand money and people who are economically illiterate. And we got a lot of them. Unfortunately, they're in our government right now. And the anti-profit thing. So we're listening to the crazed left right now. Of course, they're all shooting at the energy sector. Look at these massive profits that the oil companies are doing. Look at how they're gouging us. Look at how they're screwing us. Look at the money they're posting right now with these oil companies. They didn't say a peep 2 years ago when those oil companies were losing billions of dollars. No, suddenly there's nothing there. Guys, if they're going to lose billions of dollars for a few years, they have to make it later. But the other thing that gets to me is the people who don't understand corporations and who owns them. Like these people are saying, oh, look at these profits. Like they got this mental image that there's 5 or 6, Scrooge McDucks that are swimming through money bins and billions of dollars in oil profit. And that's what happens with it. It's just a whole bunch of money goes to a handful of people. It doesn't work that way. These are publicly traded companies and they got shares. And who do you think owns most of those shares? It's pension plans. Why do you think your pension grows? I mean, if there wasn't invested into something, your pension wouldn't grow. Your plan, whether it's a private one or whether it's CPP or just your own savings in the bank, if they can't invest that money into something to get some earnings on it, it won't grow. So they invest in companies like oil and gas companies. And when those profits come in, they make your pension plan get bigger. And the only way your pension plan has a slim hope of keeping up with inflation is if those companies can make some profit and make your plan grow. So these idiots, and they're idiots, they're saying we've got to rein in and cap the profits of these companies, or we got to nationalize these companies, or we've got to knock these companies down. Don't understand that they're actually shooting themselves in the feet. That's not doing themselves any favor. I mean, they love the call of follow the money. Fair enough. It's a call that can make some sense, but it's often just vacuously thrown out on minor unrelated issues too. So if you really want to follow the money for corporate profits, for these oil company profits, particularly here in Western Canada, follow it up the way through the shares, and you'll probably find that it's tied into your own pension savings. So if you want your pension savings to stay flat and not be able to keep up with inflation, then by all means, let's cap the profits on the oil and gas companies that are operating in Alberta and in Canada right now and actually making money right now. But they don't think that far ahead. They don't. They don't look into it. They just take it for granted that your savings and your pension are going to grow. They won't do so, as I said, without investment. It's not magic that makes these things grow. It's not unicorns. It's companies that make profits that these plans have invested in. One of the best pension plans in all of Canada, and I've always liked to, kind of twist the knife and bug some people on that a bit, has been the Ontario Teachers Pension Plan. It's huge, and credit to them. It's great. Good on you guys. You put that money aside and you invested it wisely. But it's funny because the Ontario Teachers Union loves taking all these anti-corporate stances and environmental stances and virtue signaling stances as a union, yet they're one of the most major oil and gas shareholders in North America. They own loads of shares in these oil companies. They own shares in asbestos companies and coal companies. I mean, they're pure hypocrites when it comes to it. I mean, why aren't you guys investing in nothing but green funds? Well, it's because they don't pay off worth a crap. So again, they do understand where their bread's buttered. So I'll give them credit where it's due there. But I guess when it comes to people saying we've got to knock down these oil company profits and everything, and I understand, I mean, it's hitting everybody, and it's hard for people who have to commute to work and pay those gas prices, paying your utility bills. It's putting a lot of pressure on people. And if you're not looking deeply enough, it can seem pretty offensive that, wow, I'm scraping by trying to figure out how to buy my groceries, and here's this company posting billions of dollars in profit. I can see why on the surface that would make somebody pretty upset. But look a little farther, guys, because the controls to try and stop that will damage you in the long run a heck of a lot more than what's happening right now. We've got a screwed up economy. We've got a lot of problems going on right now. But look a little harder. Some of the calls, like I said, right now to do things like nationalize energy companies, well, it didn't work very well in Venezuela, guys. I assure you it won't work well here. Let's just try to get some better policies so that everybody can enjoy some of these profits and the high employment and things that are coming with us in Western Canada with a strong, profitable energy sector. Don't shoot at it, guys. You're benefiting from it even if you don't know it sometimes. So, okay, I do have the guest in the lobby. I think I'm going to move on to him pretty soon, but I'll speak to one of our sponsors before we get to Dr. West, and that is the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. Speaking of other issues that have been pretty live and hot in the news lately, of course, Prime Minister's bill to freeze all handgun sales in Canada has certainly been making the news, and a lot of people are pretty upset about it. If you enjoy firearms, whether you're a hunter, a target shooter, I mean, a responsible, law-abiding firearm owner, as we know most of us are, you need to stand up for yourself. You need to have resources. I mean, and you know, it's not just the pushback. It's not just the lobbying. I should point out, it's an association. As you can see through the pictures scrolling there, there's video links to events and sporting events and videos on safe firearm use, gatherings and things where you can discuss these sorts of things. But as well, yes, they're pushing back against some of these legislations trying to take away your right and ability to responsibly enjoy firearms as you have. So get on board with these guys. Take out a membership. It's well worth it. And, you know, stand up for yourself. You can't, nobody's going to protect your rights for you. You have to get up and do it. So check them out, the Canadian Shooting Sports Association, CSSA-CILA. Their membership fees are very reasonable. And if you, again, enjoy firearms, it's an investment in yourself if you get on there with those guys. All right, let's get on to something lighter, but still kind of important. And I've been looking forward to this conversation. It sounds like quite a fun exhibit, and I will be taking it in. And there's also a lot to be learned from these kinds of things, and that's the Museum of Failure. And this was formed by Dr. Samuel West, and it's touring around. It's going to be in Calgary on July 1st. I think they're setting up by South Centre Mall. I'll get that confirmed. And you can go and take this in. It's a fun day out and educational. I love museums. We don't pay enough attention to them. So let's bring Dr. West in and see what this is about. Hello, Mr. West.
Hello.
Dr. West. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on the show.
So I guess I should start, and I'll let you go more. But you know, a museum of failure. I mean, what you're doing, you're not celebrating failure. You're documenting it, I guess. So we're learning from it.
Well, I mean, we have to differentiate failure. So there's bad failure and good failure. The bad failure is because of incompetence, because of insubordinance. It's because of people not following instructions. So those are the failures that should not be celebrated, not accepted. The type of failures that we celebrate at the Museum of Failure is failure when it's done in the name of progress. So when you're pushing the boundaries of the envelope, testing a new way of doing things, testing out new technology, a new idea, that's when you fail. And that's the type of failure we should be celebrating.
Yeah, well, it's like a toddler, for example, is going to have to fall down dozens and dozens of times before they learn how to walk.
Absolutely.
But,
Absolutely.
They learn with each fall. But you point out some very interesting ones, and I'm of a vintage. I remember some of them. I mean, the new Coke, for example, comes to mind. People who lived through the 80s remember so much celebration of it, I guess you could say, in promotion. And you would think this is Coca-Cola was one of the largest corporations on earth at the time. They got to have some of the best and brightest marketing minds out there, and they put out a product that was just a complete flop.
Yeah. It was in the early 80s. The Pepsi was the underdog, and Pepsi had this brilliant marketing strategy where they would ask people to take, it was called Take the Pepsi Challenge, and they would give people little plastic mugs with Coca-Cola and Pepsi, and ask them to taste it blindly. People would taste it and go, oh, I like this one better. Voila, it was Pepsi. Now, Coca-Cola was a bit worried about that consumers liked Pepsi better, so they did their own research and found out that people actually like Pepsi better than Coke. And so they changed, as the story goes, they changed the original secret iconic recipe of Coca-Cola to make it slightly sweeter, which is what Pepsi is. And they called that New Coke. And it flopped completely because people hated it. They hated that Coca-Cola would change their beloved recipe or their beloved Coca-Cola. It was a total fiasco for Coca-Cola in the short term, but because people were so worried about their favorite classic Coke disappearing, they hamstered the Coke. So Coke actually sold more than they did otherwise. So it's kind of one of those weird failures that was somewhat economically successful.
Well, yeah, I do remember the next thing they came out with rather quickly was Coke Classic. Here it is, the classic. You can come back to it, but
exactly.
It really,
that's why if you look on a can of Coke today, you'll see that it says Coca-Cola Classic. That's because of New Coke.
Yeah, and they really pulled in, I guess, their real brand loyalists. So the people who truly did love their Coke, I mean, they were really sticking to it after that. But it was an inadvertent victory, I guess.
Absolutely. The executives at Coca-Cola said afterwards, quoted saying, because of the success of the relaunch of Coca-Cola Classic, they said, so they were asked, so did you do it on purpose? Like, is it an elaborate, a ploy to a marketing ploy? And then the Coke executives said, we're not that smart.
Well, at least they're being honest there. And I know that one came up kind of recently in pop culture. My daughter watched that Stranger Things series. It's set in the 80s, and they referenced that. And she was asking me about, like, what the heck happened? What was this New Coke thing about? And I had to explain it to her because it was prior to her time.
Absolutely.
But,
I mean, so that's an example of a product from, like, a food product. There's a lot of technology products. Google Glass, they had wearables that totally failed. So products from Apple. We got some weird stuff. One of the favorite items is a face mask. It's a plastic face mask you put on your face, and it gives your face electric shocks. And the spokesperson for this product was no other than Linda Evans from the hit show Dynasty. So it looks like something from a horror film. Oh, there you've got it. All kinds of the tech failures. I've tried in the collection to not only have tech stuff, but to have medical failures. We have cars. We have a DeLorean, Ford Edsel. Obviously, a lot of tech stuff because that's where most of the innovation is happening.
The Edsel's going back quite a ways, but that was named after Ford's son, I believe.
Yeah.
So it was supposed to be a tribute, but it turned out in the worst possible way.
Yeah. Do you know why it failed?
I don't.
Yeah. There's it was a huge failure. It was like one of the biggest failures in American industry at the time. So Ford, they reluctantly innovated because Ford wasn't much for innovation. They can take any color they like as long as they take black. That's the Ford innovation.
On standardization, yeah.
So the Ford Edsel was a huge undertaking for Ford, and there was a lot of innovation. They changed. You could to change gears, you would press buttons in the steering wheel, for example. The design was revolutionary and different, but keep that image on the screen there, because what ultimately killed it was that they took the grille and they turned it vertical rather than their normal horizontal. And remember, this was in the 50s in the United States. People commented that they thought that the grille looked like female genitalia. and in no way would they drive by a car like that. So something so innocent, or like you could never anticipate this, turned it into a flop. It wasn't the only reason it flopped, but that was one of the reasons it flopped.
That's certainly one I hadn't heard of. But I mean, I guess particularly the 50s, the age of the muscle cars with the flames going down, that some might be feeling it's a phallic substitute. Then I guess you don't want to see anything that implies anything otherwise.
It's funny. I think it's a humorous reason for a multi-million-dollar failure.
And I imagine though a lot was learned from that. I mean, other car companies were clearly watching this very closely. I mean, it's a very competitive market, and learn not to at least repeat that mistake. But you mentioned the DeLorean, though that was tied to a bunch of cocaine trafficking scandals with John DeLorean.
Oh, you know about the cocaine scandals? That was his eccentric personality. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but that was a different automotive failure.
But the DeLorean, I mean, the main reason it failed is because it was a crappy car. But if you look at a little bit more in detail, the cars were manufactured in Northern Ireland in a shipyard. Like the workers at the factory had never built a car, so because of tax subsidies and other reasons, incentives, they decided to build the DeLorean there. And I mean, with zero experience in the car building industry, there was no way that they could create quality cars in that factory. That was one of the major reasons the DeLorean failed. Otherwise, the car looks awesome. I mean, it's super cool.
It stood out with that sort of unpainted stainless
steel.
Yeah,
and the Gulf wing doors that you open. It's pretty cool.
But I mean, some of those you can see where they tried and they had things, but I mean, as you said, others are sort of those, what were you possibly thinking? Yeah. Like, it just seems a layperson could even look and say, how did you think that might work?
Yeah, look at it and say, that's never, ever, ever going to work. We have one called the Juicero. The Juicero it was from 2016, 17. It's a juice press, and it's this massive $700 a juice press that's connected to the internet, of course, as all juicers should be, right? And Silicon Valley loved it because it was such a cool device, and you subscribed to bags of chopped fruit, and so these chopped fruit bags would come home, and then you would put them in this fantastically over-designed juicer, and it would press out the juice. There you go, there it is. Would press the juice out with a huge amount of force to get out all the minerals and all the vitamins and flavors. Well, Silicon Valley went crazy, and they sold quite a bit of them actually at $700 plus each, $8 to $9 a bag. Anyway, in 2017, 18 there, Bloomberg News released a video on YouTube where somebody just takes the bag and squeezes it with their hand, and out comes an entire glass of juice. It destroyed the company almost overnight. I mean, why do you need this expensive over-designed thing when you can just squeeze it with your hand? For me, it's a reminder, and it's a fantastic example of Silicon Valley's ability to create elegant, sophisticated, expensive solutions to problems that do not exist.
Yeah, well, and just one more to hit on those before I talk maybe a little more about your museum itself and the concept, though, and getting a bit more contemporary, though, was Google Glass. Like, I kind of remember when they were announcing it was coming out, I thought, this sounds kind of interesting. This could be cool. And it's Google. I mean, boy, they got some big minds and money behind it. But that one, again, was another catastrophe.
Yeah. I think it was 2012, 13. I was also excited about it. I remember thinking I'd do anything to get my hands on a Google Glass. But they were quite expensive, and you had to be specially selected to be whatever early consumer of that. The problem with Google Glass was there was a lot of problems, but one of the main problems was that it was absolutely useless. There was no use for this awesome technology. It was the first real wearable with a screen built into the glasses, voice commands, recording. It was awesome, but when you don't have any utility, you couldn't do anything with it. So it kind of failed on that note. Most importantly, it failed because Google didn't appreciate the privacy issues. So I mean, they're basically a spy device connected to internet, and people. I mean, it looks awesome and the technology is awesome, but Google totally underestimated how people would react to the privacy issues. And in fact, there were signs outside of cafes in San Francisco. It would say, "No dogs, can enter. and then it also have no glass holes. That's what people that use Google Glass were called, glass holes. Not so cool. Google totally failed on this one.
Yet, ironically, a few years later, I mean, people realize that a person could be holding up their phone and recording or taking pictures at any time, and I think people have just learned to get more guarded with what they're doing.
Exactly. I don't know if the privacy issues would be as much of a problem today, because today it's either Apple or Google that owns all your data, so you don't really have a choice anymore. But at the time in 2013, it was a real concern.
Yeah. So getting to the museum itself, like what inspired you to put this together? It must have taken quite some time to get this many exhibits and things like that, and have it on the road like this.
I started it in 2017, and I was doing research in organizational psychology on how companies can boost innovation. And one of the biggest obstacles to innovation was and still is the fact that people are afraid of failing. So both individuals and even organizational teams are afraid of taking meaningful risks where they risk failure. So the museum was born out of that frustration of how can I communicate to my clients and through my research that it's really how important it is to take these meaningful risks and how inevitable failure is if we want progress. So the idea for the Museum of Failure, actually, I stole it from another museum.
Well, it's innovative.
Yeah, you steal stuff from others. No, I was inspired by a visit to the in the Mediterranean country of Croatia. They have a museum called the Museum of Broken Relationships, and I just thought that was such an awesome museum. It's so crazy and abstract, and I thought if they can do that, I can do a Museum of Failure.
Well, yeah, and I mean, quirky museums can be fun too. One we have here in Alberta in a small town is the Gopher Museum. We got
Gopher. I love it.
And somebody decided with a taxidermist bent, they actually had hundreds of these gophers, and people created little outfits for them. And
all right. That sounds like an awesome museum.
It draws a lot of visitors to an otherwise kind of insignificant prairie town.
Yeah. I love it. I didn't even know that existed. That's fantastic.
Yeah. So, I mean, yours also, as you said, has a bit of an educational component. I mean, failure doesn't have to be considered a negative thing. It's a step.
Yeah. Hey, Gopher Museum, if you're watching this, contact us. We want one of your failed taxidermied gophers in our museum in Calgary. Contact me.
Keep that in mind. It's the Torrington Gopher Museum. I think it's just about an hour and a half out of town while you're out here. So
sorry, what was your question? I was obsessed with the Gopher Museum.
Oh, I already forgot. The Gopher Museum is pretty easily distracted. But
I guess I have to get this in. The aim of the museum is still to help us understand and appreciate why we have to accept failure, because there won't be any innovation, there won't be any progress in any aspect of life, business, arts in any way if we don't accept the risk of failure when we experiment and explore. So it's a fun museum, but there's a really serious sort of red thread throughout the entire exhibition.
Yeah, I mean, you want to avoid failure. That's always your goal. But don't look at a failure as an end. It could be just considered a step towards something better.
Exactly.
Well, great. So, I mean, it's set up. It's going to be at South Center. Is this a freestanding thing outside of it, or is there space within the mall that you guys have set up within?
Oh, why do you ask such difficult questions? Okay. It's connected to the mall, and it is accessible through the mall. But I haven't seen the venue yet, but it's in the mall. And I'm pretty sure you can get it through the mall.
Great. Okay. No,
is that a good enough answer, or?
It is. I mean, people will find it, and I'm certain it'll be
find it. Yeah. There's big banner. If you're there, you won't miss it.
Yeah, and my viewers know where South Center Mall is, or most of them would. It's on the south side of Calgary, off McLeod Trail. There, it's a sizable facility. So, I mean, I'm looking forward to it. I really will have to make a point of getting out there on a day and have it.
Okay, so I just want to, because I don't want it to be too easy for you. So when you visit, I'm not gonna tell you now, but when you visit, there are 2 specific Canadian failures that we added just for Calgary. So your job is to find those.
Okay, well, yes, I don't want spoilers. We still got to have some discovery there, and I know you have 100 and some out there. We'll only cover a few. I mean, people want to discover and enjoy them in person. So, and that's it's going to be running for I believe a few weeks at least. It's coming in on July 1st, is it?
July 1st, and it runs about 2 months.
Oh, 2 months. Okay, so
I
for
think
the whole...
so. Check it out. The exact when it closes has not been confirmed yet. So
yeah, no problem at all. So so where can people find information on the museum and your work then, Dr. West?
Yeah, check out museumoffailure.com, and that's more about the museum in general, and there's some examples of the items on display. And then for specifically for Calgary, you click on Calgary and you get to the ticket sales page with more information about opening times and all that.
Excellent. Well, thanks for coming on to talk to us about it.
My pleasure.
Dr. West, I was looking forward to it, and you didn't disappoint. So I look
thank you so
to
much.
Checking the museum out, and I hope lots of other folks do as well.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
So yes, that was Dr. Samuel West of the Museum of Failure. I mean, the name says it all, and something a little lighter. And hey, so it's going to be there for, it sounds like, almost a couple months. It's things to do, I mean, not every day is going to be sunny. You want to get out, check some stuff out. And I like kind of the negative, positive messaging at the same time, right? Museum of Failure, that sounds about as negative as it gets. But, look at it as you learn from these things. You pick up from it. And it might not be the person who failed who learns. Maybe somebody else looks at it and says, oh, well, I see how that's screwed up, but I can do better. And sometimes they do. So I saw one of the commenters. I believe he's an American, so I didn't want to pull him in on it, but I had to fight a bit of a laugh. Commenter Cliff Burkhardt saying, when will Trudeau be included in this museum? Yeah, I wish he was already. I like to think at some point or another he will be included in that. Unfortunately, as I was kind of ranting about before, Trudeau is still going strong, and I'm not sure what the hell is going to get rid of that guy. But so many of those interesting things. I mean, I don't know how many others. I saw something about looked like a phone attached vibrator or something like that. I guess if it's done right, I could see how that'd be profitable, but I don't know. And something I meant to mention was beta. If people remember going all the way back, there was VHS and there was beta for anybody who wanted to watch movies. And you hear from a lot of tech geeks of the 80s, like beta was far superior, way better, everything else, but they just couldn't market themselves well enough. And it's kind of one of those areas where there could only be one. And VHS took way off and it dominated. There were a lot of other things, video discs and things that came around once this new concept of bringing movies into your home outside of having an actual film projector or just hoping that the right one came on TV. And Betamax, it went down the tubes. I mean, VHS is pretty much gone now too, but it managed to have a good couple of decade run before it went. So I don't know if that's in the museum or not. And as Dr. West said, there's going to be a couple of Canadian presentations there, which probably won't be Trudeau at this point, but maybe down the road. That was a good, fun chat. It can't always be all politics and everything else. And it can be a learning thing. I like that message. I really do. If you're going there with your kids or grandkids or just even for yourself, and think about that. Okay, these failed, but it's a good life lesson for kids. Hey, if you failed at this, it's not the end. It's a step. It's you can do better. You can move up. So it's a museum with a message. And the Gophers, well, themselves, they failed. They just weren't fast enough getting out of the way of the trap or the 22 shell or whatever was coming at them. All right, I'm going to speak to our sponsor again before I get on to some more news here, and that is Bitcoinwell. Speaking of things that fail and come and go, there's so many digital currencies out there. That's part of the overwhelming world, I think, of it. There's still only a few, like I talked about VHS and beta, there's really only a few that are heavyweights that are going to be withstanding, and Bitcoin was kind of among the first. And they're pretty solid. Even though numbers go up, they go down. I'm not going to give specific investment advice, but if you're looking to get into digital currency, you want to do it safely. You want to make sure that the ones teaching you about it and facilitating you are a good, reputable company. And that's what Bitcoinwell is and what they're about. They help educate you with it and show you the ways you can make it practical, show you how you can set it up. They offer that one-on-one personalized service, and they're right out here in Western Canada. So if you're looking to get into Bitcoin, check them out, bitcoinwell.com, and take control of your money. Let's see here. 8-track from Brian Derazes. Yeah, that's the way to go. Nothing like your song stopping halfway through. But I mean, 8-tracks, that was a big innovation for vehicles. Think about that. When did they come out? The end of the 60s, early 70s? But I mean, you were a slave to radio until the 8-track came, right? Like everything else, you'd have to play a record, but you certainly couldn't drive and listen to a record. With an 8-track cassette, those great big old things, you could slam that in there, and I think you had, 4 or 5 different songs you could kind of push button your way around to. That was a big innovation, and then the cassettes came along, and then CDs. It seems one of our biggest innovations is just changing ways where you can listen to music. The Walkman was a huge one. These weren't failures. These were just things that came along. And there had to be some fails on the way, I imagine. LinkedIn user, that one doesn't show the person's name with the LinkedIn viewers. Sorry about that, guys. But says he saw a Betamax cassette once in the archive library of Fort Steele, of all places. Never actually watched one. But Fort Steele, wow, I wouldn't think they'd cover that down there. That's down in southeastern BC there. It's a neat spot with actually a big grounds, kind of like Heritage Park in Calgary and things like that. Neil Zockel saying quadraphonic 8-track. Yeah, all of us older watchers and viewers now, we're all running through our heads and thinking of all those things that came and went. But that'd be fun, I think, for some of the younger visitors to hit that museum too, and just see some of these things that we oldsters talk about, and they never had to live through it, so they don't know what the hell we were speaking of. Well, they can see some examples at that museum there and look at those things. And you know what? Another good day trip, since I brought it up, is for those who haven't heard of it, the Torrington Gopher Museum. Yeah, there's little dioramas, gophers in little outfits. I mean, there was a lot of work for the people up there to sew those little clothings and put them on. I mean, it's morbid for people who don't care much for taxidermy, but it's a pretty unique experience. And hey, I mean, come on, who the hell ever talked about Torrington that much before the Gopher Museum came around? So there's lots of things to do in Alberta as we're on that limited budget these days, and there's only so much you can do. Some of these day trips and things you can find locally to entertain yourself over the summer. Some of these museums and things like that. Brian Darris, oh yeah, I remember hair in a can. I remember those ads so well. Hey, they show those balding guys. I'm sure I got the head for it now, and they just spray that on and it would fill in and apparently look natural. Of course, I guess if you went out in a rainstorm, you were going to have the black streaks coming down your face as the hair in your can melted down. But I don't know if that was a fail. I think a lot of guys took them up on that until maybe some better options came around. All right, let's get on to some politics and news again. And what do we got? A federal research unit detected what might be a Chinese Communist Party information operation that aimed to discourage Canadians of Chinese heritage from voting for the Conservatives in the last federal election. This one's interesting. So, we talked, I mean, the BSers in the government, and the state broadcaster, the CBC, they had to retract that when they're implying, Russians were funding the truckers' convoy, and lots of people are saying, oh, this is all an American initiative and all that crap. And it was a load of crap. It was all grassroots gun fundraising for the most part and everything behind it. But something that really has been happening by the sounds of it in foreign interference is the Chinese were trying to influence voters in Canada in favor of the Liberals. And kind of makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, Trudeau, among his many, many, many weak spots, China is one of them. He's always had a blind spot there. He's always been soft with them. Well, how direct is that? We got the Chinese, even if this was happening without actual collusion with the Liberal Party or Trudeau, it's showing that the Chinese government knows, though, that this is a better government to have in power for themselves than the other one. So they were willing to mess around with and try and change our electoral outcome in a foreign way. I don't, as with Trudeau's other scandal, unfortunately, do not expect the Liberals to dig that far into this potential scandal. And they will just hope that it goes by the wayside. Something of a good news story, and Dave brought that up in the newsroom the other day. One of those credit where due stories, and it's to do with a museum again. So some of us might have been hearing about that. Crazy. I talked to our reporter in BC, Reed Small, about that the other day. This Royal BC Museum, they were going to close the existing one, tear it down, and spend it. I mean, the number was just astronomical to rebuild a new one. They were talking like up to $1 billion or something, and it was going to take 800 million or something. With government budgets, it was going to be much longer. And it was getting more and more controversial for one, because the reason to get rid of the old one wasn't so much that it was out of date and so on, though it was older, but was that it was colonial. The woke were getting upset. They felt it represented too much of the old times. Well, that's what a friggin' museum does. I mean, if I ever get the chance to go over and see Vlad the Impaler's old castle in Romania there, I think it'd be an interesting tour and thing to observe. It doesn't mean I want the world to be loaded with impalers again, or that I celebrate what that sadistic, nasty man did back then. but we don't have to tear down everything that represented somebody who was pretty nasty and evil in the past. And not to mention, I don't think the colonialism of North America, particularly Canada, was nearly as evil as the woke like to keep making it out to be. Either way, that false premise, essentially, to try and tear down that museum and build the new one, finally caught up to the government. The polls, the rest, everything else, we're finding out that most BC citizens wanted no part of this. Like, this was terrible low support. And it's where the credit where due part comes. John Horgan came out and said, it's done. We're not doing it. We've pulled the pin. We've listened to the public. We misread it. And in his own words, he said, I've made the wrong call. And he's backing off on it. Good on you. Good on you. You know what? We get way too many politicians who screw things up right and left, who just, damn it, I've dug in my heels now, and we're not going to back down on this no matter what happens. And Horgan at least said, no, I'm going to do an about face on this. I'm going to admit that I was wrong. We're going to cancel this museum, back off on it, and move ahead with some other things. So, again, he's an NDP premier. There's not many things I'll give him credit for. I'm sure many BC citizens will still want him out of office. But hey, the man did one thing that's right, and we don't see enough of that from politicians and leaders, is just admitting I screwed up, and I'm going to reverse my screw up rather than stubbornly doubling down on an ideological trip and screwing everybody. Vlad, there's nothing I can bring up without it turning into a debate and controversy, but that's okay. That's part of what's live. So Saniko says, Vlad did what he had to against the Ottoman Empire. Vlad did nothing wrong. God, I can't even critique Vlad the Impaler without somebody getting upset. Okay, well, I won't go into the nuances of what the wars were in the area or who was trying to invade or whatever. It was Vlad's techniques to try and hold off the invaders and things such as that, which, as his name went, was the impaling. And he would put sharpened stakes into the ground and basically put it up a person's butt and let gravity very slowly and agonizingly take care of them. And I think, I could be wrong, and maybe my history might be corrected. That's what the commenters are about. But he actually turned away an incoming army because they came up and saw all of these dead and dying people lined up along the road on these poles. And it was his own people he was doing it to a great degree as well. And they're like, this is crazy. This guy is scary. This is as psycho as it gets. I want no part on this. I'm out of here. And they turned away. So it was an effective deterrent from invasion, but a pretty horrific act in order to do so. That's what I'm going to get, but I'm not going to get into a nuanced debate on whether he was good for the place as a whole or not, or what the politics of the time were. We got enough of our politics of the current time to debate and go over. Brad asking if there's any updates on the leadership race. I guess the only update we have for now is that Michelle Rempel is not going to run for it. On the federal front, by the way, that's that reminder. We have a debate that the Western Standard's hosting. I'm glad for that reminder. It's going to be at the Petroleum Center or Petroleum Club, July 8th, 3 p.m. If you're off work, come on down. And, for $25 you can get in, and there's only 300 seats. So at least 4 of those leadership candidates will be there. It's a good environment to get a good discussion. It's going to be focused on Western issues, of course, because it's a Western Standard debate. And there's a cocktail hour afterwards and such too, where chances are you might be able to get face-to-face and have some one-on-one time with some of these candidates, because they'll hang around after that debate and talk. It's a better atmosphere. Plus, you can get around some other Western Standard viewers and followers, and the rest of us all be there. Derek and me and Dave and that, and Mel, and too many people to name nowadays with this place. Robert Duncan saying, is Pierre going to be there? No, I'm afraid he's not. We wanted him to, and he's not. As for why, I guess you would have to ask the Poilievre campaign. It can be tough getting, once they feel they're in the front running, sometimes they want to stick to being careful and not necessarily get into those environments. And as for Lewis, I believe it was, as Cheryl's asking, a scheduling issue. She just, the date did change, because what had happened is once Poilievre dropped, then things had to get rearranged because it was going to be a bigger event. And then it was rescheduled for one day later, but or was it one day earlier? I can't remember. One day earlier. And unfortunately, Lewis already had a commitment. She can't make it. But the other 4 will be there. And it's going to be a good gathering. And as I said, the other part is it's a social event. Get on down there. There's, the rest of the Western Standard people, followers, and more informal, a cocktail thing afterwards and all that. So check it out, westernstandard.news, and you can find the information to attend that debate. Let's see a little more on the news stories again. On reporting the obvious, this is a story I saw. Police statistics find in Calgary that people don't feel safe, and crime and safety are always top of mind for residents. Well, I know we've been kind of screaming that here for quite some time now. The only thing that surprised me out of the story is police statistics show 8% increase in violent crime in central Canada in the first 3 months of 2022. And I think that's over the last 5-year trend. The only thing that surprised me is that it was only that low that it's increased, because it's pretty insane on transit and downtown, and it's bad. Maybe, there's some of the things with statistics. A lot of it's appearance. There was a story I read. Who wrote that one? I think it might have been the Herald. I do a lot of reading, guys. I try to keep up on these issues. And it was pretty in-depth, and it was pretty good. It was talking about a person standing on an LRT platform, and they could see one who was punching a wall or a building, and another one yelling at the clouds, and another one kind of aggressively coming towards people. Nobody was actually harmed. So there was no violent crime that happened, but a very intimidating and troublesome environment. So, I mean, a lot of those people down there, the addicts and that, are very, it's not terribly common when they'll actually physically assault people, but they have, and they've done it very badly, to some individuals. Overall, the actual violent incidents only went up 8%. But I mean, hey, that's cold comfort when you're standing on a platform and you got these crazed out of control people around you and moving all over the place. Brad asking my thoughts on removing the transmission distribution fees. That's getting into the whole electrical grid. Here's one of the areas where I'm going to admit some ignorance. I follow those things and I watch them, but it's such a complicated mess, though. The deregulation of electricity in Alberta that's been going on, and people fighting about it. It's Ralph Klein's days, and the amount of fees we get, and transmission, distribution fees, all those things on your bill that break it down. It is so complicated. I think at any point, anyways, removing fees just to get people, to give them a break on energy right now. If the government's doing well on royalties, help them out, because they're having a hell of a hard time. And Tim Burns saying they had to move the platform on 8th and 8th by the Crack Max. For those who remember it, I used to live in the Continental Towers. Oof, boy. 25, 26 years ago, and Crack Max on 7th and 8th. It was known as that back then. That's where the crackheads hung out. It was a rough spot, and in that little corner, and there was an LRT platform. That's where a lot of the dealing happened. But every city has a spot like that, and that's where it got that nickname, Crack Max. I think it's Circle K now. It doesn't roll off the tongue as well as Crack Max. But it was just there. There was like a 2-block area where it was a problem. Then you'd see the odd stray thing. What's different now is it's everywhere. It's all over downtown. You don't have to go to just one platform or one station. Yeah, they moved it. Now it's over between 7th and 8th, and still it is a horror story. The scene, the park that's right next to it. I walk by there every day. I walked by this morning. There was a whole bunch of them in there, all in different states of inebriation and dealing and so on. It's right in the open. We got a hell of an issue going here. And it's not just here. It's Edmonton, it's Toronto, it's Vancouver. So at least it's making more news now, though it is. So, I mean, that's, I think, some of the step towards getting change. People are, our city hall is still dodging it. That story I read in the Herald, and the mayor, Gondek, is oblivious and in denial and as stupid on this one as she's ever been. I'll give it that. Some other people are waking up. Gondek, no, she's doubling down. She doesn't think that we need more policing. She doesn't think it's really a problem. But she's really makes me miss Nenshi. And if people know the relationship I had with Nenshi during his almost 10 years in power, understand what I'm saying when Gondek makes me miss Nenshi. I really, if I had a chance to say, Nenshi, can you come back and take over for the rest of this term, I would do it in a heartbeat. Because yes, I didn't like the guy. I didn't like a lot that he did, but he still had a hell of a lot more gray matter between his ears than Jody Gondek does. Cheryl Dawn asking about why are people saying not to buy gas between July 3rd and 5th? I have no idea on that one. That's the first I've heard of it. I don't know. If it's somebody talking about a strike, maybe, one of those consumer pushback things, that happens now and then. Some people say, we'll bring the oil companies to their knees, don't buy. It never works. Never works. People need it. At worst, it'll be a tiny little insignificant hiccup in change of use. Maybe it's people saying they have inside info on when prices are going to go up or something, though. I don't know. But that one I don't know anything about. So maybe some others will. Gary saying he'll buy CPC membership and vote for Roman Baber. Yeah, and Roman will be there for the leadership debates. He's been really good. He's been in studio here. Melanie talked to him, interview. It went really well. He's very good and outspoken and open. He's been on my show here before too. Yeah, Brian Gutenberg, that's another one. Legalizing hard drugs is too much swinging left. We're in for a country of hurt. And yeah, no, I really want to study more on that. I'm trying to reach out to more guests on it because it is just such a complicated issue. Portugal's done some of their things with decriminalization and different, but there's more to it. There's treatment options and things they incorporated. I mean, it's a whole plan. It's a bigger thing than just letting it go. The other, so Portugal did that, and there's lessons to be learned that may be good, maybe bad. But we look at Portland, and it's a catastrophe. I mean, 700% increase in overdoses since they decriminalized drugs there. It's just gone totally out of control. So that's a failure. Let's learn from these things before we try them. There's no easy answers, but we know some that are failed. Speaking of the Museum of Fail, okay, we looked over at Portland, it failed. So let's look at them and not do that. And let's look somewhere where maybe it's working. I don't think it's really working very well anywhere. That's how hard this is. There's no, I can't find any examples of cities that have done a really, really good job of managing to get their addiction epidemic under control. I mean, some are doing worse than others, but none of them are doing well. This is spreading everywhere. And that's why I want to see more discussion and try and find ways we can improve this, because it's getting worse and worse. And there's obviously no easy answers. Why aren't there more easy answers for things in life? The only easier answer I found is some battles aren't worth carrying on. Learn how to put the toilet seat down after you're using it. I know it's a minor thing, but it saves you so much grief later on in life, guys. Don't die on that hill. See, sometimes there are easy solutions, but when it comes to drug and crime, there aren't. All right, I'm going to wrap it up today, guys. I got a couple of good guests on tomorrow, assuming they show up, and I'm certain they will. I'm going to have Matthew Horwood. He's been actually reaching out, and he's been busy. That story has been really taken off. He's our main bureau chief out there in Ottawa, and he's been asking people about vaccine injuries. He's just been overwhelmed with the amount of stories and people getting back to him. Check it out at westernstandard.news. You can see what he's been writing, and he's going to come on and talk about that. I'm going to have Paul Hinman on. He's going to talk about a bit of what's going on with the Wild Rose Independence Party. And I think I might get Rick Northey, who's on the board with them as well, to come on afterwards. So we'll get kind of both sides on what the hell's going on, because that party sounds like it's got some very serious infighting problems going on right now. So thank you all for tuning in today, guys. And I will see you all again at 11:30 a.m. tomorrow.